Hello everyone, hope you're well. It is a little bit of a gloomy day here in Lisbon today, but I have the filming bug and I always take advantage of that when I've got it. So I'm here to film a video that I've wanted to do for a while, but it feels a little bit more of the time because we've been here I think for 10 months now. I did ask you guys on Instagram to ask me any questions relating to our move, and you guys did. But before I do that, and to be honest, I think some of the questions kind of relate to this anyway, I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory. If some of you guys go back in the archives, you will probably remember from so many of my question and answers videos where, you know, I would be asked, and this just goes to show why you should never say never in life. I would be asked, would you ever move to a different country? Would you ever live abroad? And I'd always say no. You know, never really had the traveling bug, wasn't really for me. And when I met my husband, you know, again, it never really came up in our plans to ever want to move. It wasn't sort of something that, let's say, we both talked about or we both used to really dream about. Wasn't really something that either of us were kind of conscious of, and if anything we were talking more about planting roots in London. Then my husband went on a work trip and he went to Lisbon. He came here, I think he's been here a couple of times before than me, and he always kind of mentioned to me, he said, you know, I think Lisbon's great. It's got obviously great weather, great food, great people. It's got a great expat community. Just kind of would plant it or put it out there and sort of said, I remember once he even said to me, if there was ever a city that I would live in, it would be Lisbon. And I'd never been, I had been to Portugal before, but I'd been to the Algarve. So, you know, very different vibe. I would still classify myself as more of a city person, but again, I'm never gonna say never because I'm not gonna do that anymore. In mind at the time, I just started my business. Well, not just started, it was kind of like a year and a half, nearly 2 years in. He kept kind of bringing it up, and there was, you know, there always is with moving. There's always sort of attractions. He also told me about this visa that they had here in Portugal and how it could be beneficial for us and all that kind of thing. We'd actually done quite a little bit of traveling. We have done a lot of city breaks, like we've been to Barcelona, we've been to Amsterdam, which, oh my God, I loved Amsterdam. That was actually one of the places that I would have, you know, I would love to live there one day. It's just got such a cool vibe. It kind of reminds me of like a cooler, as in terms of temperature, Lisbon as well a little bit, but with that kind of Scandi twist. But, you know, we'd been around, but nowhere sort of, again, gripped my husband like Lisbon. And we sort of said, look, why don't we do a bigger, longer trip as much as we can in Lisbon? And we said, look, we're gonna rent an Airbnb. We're gonna pretend almost like we live here. We're not gonna do it in a hotel. So we said we were gonna go in the winter, because if we liked it in the winter, then we're gonna obviously love it in the summer. And bear in mind that the mindset that I had when I went was not the mindset. Like, I already feel like I went into it with a not negative mindset, but in a kind of, this is kind of funny mindset. And we got a nice Airbnb. We rented, I believe, in Grassa, and nice area, a little bit more like hilly and much more touristy than kind of where we're living now. So also bearing that in mind. And listen, I liked it. Don't get me wrong, I came, I saw, we had great food, we walked around. The weather was a bit pants when we came, which was a bit frustrating, but you know, we did all the kind of normal things, and we also just lived a little bit. But when we came back, I just completely pushed it to the back of my mind. And to be honest, so did he. So obviously we're a duo. He's not going to enforce something on me. And I think in the past, when I put videos out there, people have been, you know, concerned about me and sort of, which is very sweet. But first of all, my husband's not like that. And I'm very much not like that. I'm a very, you know, I think if you've known me for a long time, you know that I think about things very carefully. I'm also an extremely independent person, always have been. And I always, now especially that we're a team, we look at things as if we're thinking about it in the future of us as a couple. So, you know, my business, like I said, was taking off, everything was going on, so totally parked it. Fast forward, like, I think, how much, like 8-9 months later, I had gone through a really hard time. Don't want to get all like violin-y, but was sort of struggling, met with my mental health, wasn't really feeling how my life plans were going in terms of, didn't really know what I wanted to do, felt a little bit lost. And my husband also re-brought up the fact that there was a lot of opportunities for him here in Lisbon, and his new role that he was working at had his bosses essentially live in Lisbon, and it kind of just all came up again, along with the fact that the visa that we really wanted to originally come here on was going to expire, I believe, in the December. Sometimes having something there that is a little bit more pressurizing, you know, like an exam or a test or something, or an upcoming visa expiring, it sort of puts your mind into gear and makes you think about things again. And at the time we were looking into buying a house in the UK, but I just kind of thought, if we don't do this now, there's always going to be something at the back of my mind that says, what if? And I don't know, it's almost like I woke up one day and just kind of, it came to me. And I've been trying to be less of that kind of person who just says, it's all or nothing, or oh my god, what are people gonna think, which unfortunately is something that has always stuck with me, and more of just, why don't you try something, and if it doesn't work out, you just come back. We'd actually also been through the process of selling our flat, which, oh my god, when I went through that process, I was like, I'm definitely not buying anything until I am so certainly sure that I'm gonna be, or we're gonna be living there for a very long time. So just a lot of my mindset around career, lifestyle, what we want to do changed, and we said, okay, why don't we come back to Lisbon, you know, try it out, try this visa thing out, and just see how it goes, apply and kind of go from there. And I'd also got I had another job, so some of you guys might know, but I've always liked doing lots of different things. But other than the clinic, I've also, other than social media, been doing another role, so I'd also let work know. And we came out and we just said, look, let's do it. Like, if we don't do this now, I feel like we're gonna regret it. So that is kind of the story of how it all went. And it's to think that if it wasn't, because I'll be honest, I think the visa thing is what really propelled us into coming here. And to think something so small could have changed the trajectory of our life going forward is crazy. But we did manage to get the visa. We are living in Portugal on what's called an NHR. And I do believe that they stopped it, but I think they've brought something out, and don't, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, that is quite similar. But that's the visa that we're currently here on. But my husband and I both do have European passports, so it was much easier for us to come and live here, just like normal, even if we didn't have the visa. So kind of what I want to tell people is as well, like, let's say you're living in the UK and you want to move to Portugal. I have so many friends here that have done exactly that, and although it's a much more lengthier process, I know people from like America, Canada come here and they still have managed to do it. So I don't also want people to think that it was just, obviously it was a lot easier for us because we have European passports, but you can do it nevertheless, it just kind of takes more time. So that is the backstory. I know I might have been waffling, but it's important to give some context. So let's answer your questions. Do you both speak Portuguese? If not, did he or I get a job out here, and how are we managing? So most of my friends that I know who are expats, we all are kind of working remotely or digitally, you know, like digital nomads, is that what you call it nowadays? I don't know anybody who's working for a Portuguese company. Obviously you can, there's nothing to say that you can't, but I have heard that the job market here is difficult for a Portuguese person, let alone for an expat. In terms of language, unfortunately, we do not speak the language yet. I am definitely getting my butt into gear this year and wanting to learn. I have obviously kind of a bad, poor excuse, but the wedding was just taking up so much of my time. But I have booked on to do Portuguese lessons again. I did try and do it for a bit, but I just got really overwhelmed. I was so cocky when it came to talking about learning Portuguese. I honestly thought, oh my God, I'm half Italian, you know, I'm good at languages. Also, I thought, I'm gonna pick this up like like that, it's gonna be so easy for me, ha ha ha. And then came here, realized it's so much more difficult, and now completely retract everything I said. Portuguese is difficult, and it's funny, I actually had a form tutor. I hope you guys have a cup of tea whilst watching this video, or you're like getting ready. I'd love to know what you're doing if and when you're watching this video. I remember my year 7, because I went to a language college. It was an all-girl Catholic language college, if you can imagine. And my form tutor at the time, her name was Miss Lopez. She was a tiny, really sweet Portuguese lady, and she was Portuguese. And I actually took Portuguese for a very, very short stint after school and never continued it because I did find it difficult. So yeah, TBD on the Portuguese, but I will learn. I don't care how long it takes. I'm dedicated to the cause, maybe more than my husband, just because I think it comes more naturally to me. Like, I do find when people speak slower, I do understand, or I get the gist, but I just find it super hard to respond because Portuguese is a much more closed language, whereas Italian is a much more open. So, oh my God, please, all my Portuguese followers, don't laugh at me, but like, you guys say, like, if you want to ask someone, how are you, or how's everything going, you say tutto bene. And in Italian, you would say tutto bene. So it's much more tutto bene, you know, open, whereas in Portuguese, like tutto bene, like very, very fast. Buon fin de semana, whereas in Italian, you would say buona fine settimana. So it's much more, you know, kind of more like the Spanish. So watch this space. Someone said, how have you both managed to make the move work with existing jobs? So great question. As I said, most people that I know here work for like international companies. They don't work for Portuguese, but essentially we just work remotely. So my husband works remotely. I also up until now have worked remotely. You guys know I've worked in social media since I was 17, and obviously I'm very lucky that I get to do that. I also have now closed my clinic, which if you don't follow us on Instagram, you might not know, but that was a decision that came from essentially the fact that I do foresee myself being here longer. It's not, and also I think a lot of my followers might think, oh, Barbara, was the move the reason? No, this was something that was on the back of my mind before we left. Running an aesthetics clinic, although I loved it, it's a lot on the kind of, I think you have to be a certain type of personality to do it. I don't want to get too much into this, but I also don't want people, not that I really care to be honest, but to think that this move was the reason for that. But I think the trajectory of how I plan my life meant it was a lot harder for me to kind of keep a relationship with my patients. It wasn't something that I saw I could kind of scale from being here. So that's why. So I do miss all of my patients, but it was an amazing time of my life. And yeah, I'm never going, I'm so glad that I don't have that what if I started an aesthetics business, and I'm so proud of myself, and I still think that my work and all of that spoke for itself. So yes, and then I also have been working, which some of you guys might be very surprised because I haven't really talked about it at all. I've actually been working in the medical cannabis business for the last year, which is crazy because I never thought I would work in any such industry again. Never say never. But I've been working in the medical cannabis industry now for a year as a pharmacist. So that is why I've been able to work remotely. And, you know, I'm not going to go too much into that again, but that is what I've been doing. And it just goes to show that even like as a pharmacist, or, you know, there's so many things you can do. Consulting, for example, that's kind of the way that healthcare is nowadays has changed and evolved so much that, you know, I don't really also want people to think that you have to pigeonhole yourself. I mean, I've always said, even with pharmacy, you don't have to pigeonhole yourself into thinking you just have to work in a hospital or in a, you know, Boots or a Lloyd's. One of my friends said, Portuguese people are the best. I said, yes, 100%. They are honestly the best. Does it feel weird being in a different country, and how do you get used to change? This is where, like, I would have thought it would have taken us longer to settle here. I think, honestly, and I'm not just saying this, we have been so fortunate with where we live. And that for me would be the biggest kind of factor in how we've managed to do this. I reached out to an estate agent here called Eddie, and he helped us essentially work out where we wanted to live. So this is a plug for Eddie. He not only specializes in house selling, but also helping people move here. And he just gave us such great insight on, you know, areas and which areas he thought would suit our needs. And for us, we actually live in an area called, it's kind of in between Saldana and Avenidas Novas. And it's, oh my God, I don't think he could have chosen a better area for us. It's central enough where we feel it's easy to get to everything. We have a station super close to us. We, you know, all of that kind of thing. But it's unlike where we stayed when we first came, which was an area called Grassa. It doesn't have the charm, which funny enough, I really wanted when we were looking at houses with Eddie. I was like, no, I really want that kind of charming Lisbon property. But we went much more practical with our flat that we chose. And it's just, I think the reason we settled in so well is because we got so lucky with housing and where we live and like just our neighborhood, what's around us, how we get here, the pavements. We don't have that like super hilly Lisbon life unless we want to. So the great thing about Saldana and Avenidas Novas is it's very flat and the pavements are very large. It's a much more working area. So we don't have to, like, it's super quiet. It's a Sunday here today. It is dead. There's barely any cars on the roads here or even parked up. It's very kind of worky. Some of the restaurants are even closed during the weekend because people just don't really go. But we're so lucky because of that. So it doesn't feel like when I go for my food shop or when I go to the gym, I'm not like trudging up a hill like in Grassa where we stayed at our Airbnb. We had this massive hill to tackle like every single day, and it was just, for me and my husband and the way we are, it just wouldn't have been sustainable long term. Whereas now we definitely think like if we ever did, which I hope for the moment we don't, but if we had to move from this place, we would stay in kind of the Campo Pequeno, I think, or Avenidas Novas, Saldana, like Marquês de Pombal kind of area where you have that little bit more flat, easier to kind of live in lifestyle and amenities, but you just, unfortunately, you just give up the charm. But the apartments are a little bit roomier, you know, they're not so clamped together, you normally get more light, that kind of thing. Really hope you guys are enjoying this video because I know I'm doing a lot of talking, but I'm really enjoying it. But essentially, to round up that question, it would be really, if you are going to come and move here, do your research, do your due diligence in terms of areas. I had loads of our friends stay in Airbnbs before they actually chose an apartment. I would say that's a great idea, but obviously it's hard because then you have to really time things well when you move. So I'm so surprised as to how many people said that they want to watch this on YouTube. I don't know why, I just didn't really think you guys would want to see it here. Someone said, how do you feel about your choice to settle in Portugal rather than London? Any regrets? So just to give you guys an idea, we are seeing ourselves here for the foreseeable. We don't really want to put a number on it or a time period, but I still can't believe that it's been nearly a year. We moved here January 3rd and it's going to be nearly a year that we're here. It has flown by, but at the same time, we always say this, it hasn't. But, you know, just to give you an idea, like I now have my favorite nail place. I have my hairdresser. I have you know, the place I get my brows and stuff done. I know where to go and get laser. My gym, oh my God, I could harp on about my gym day in and day out, our gym actually. I actually won't gatekeep. I'll also put like down below my favorite, I might do like a little roundup of favorite restaurants, my favorite places to go and get stuff done and all that kind of thing, because I think that would be good for you guys. Do I have any regrets of not living in London? Candidly, no. I'm someone who, I feel like adapts quite quickly, but also knows what she likes and doesn't like very quickly. I am an extremely decisive person. When I get something in my mind or when I have an opinion about something, I feel like I'm almost too decisive. And I feel like already being here like a couple of months in, I knew I loved it. Actually, maybe even more than my husband. And that's just because I feel like I really tried to immerse myself as soon as I moved here. So I think literally a week in, I signed up to a gym. I very quickly went on Bumble BFF, which is it's essentially Bumble, so it's not dating, but it's to find friends, which for me just made things so much easier, which I would never have done in the UK. I don't know why. I actually would say if you live in the UK and you're looking to make friendships, give it a shot. Like, I don't know what the friendship scene is like in London, but that app has completely changed my life. Honestly, and my friend and I joke about this all the time. The only like 2 things that I find difficult here are, listen, people talk about bureaucracy and that's fine, but I feel like you don't handle that every day. Like, that's not something that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So it's almost like it's fine. You just get on with it. But for me, the things that are not as fun are food shopping. I used to drive in London everywhere. We don't have a car here. We have a Vespa. It's not actually a Vespa, but like a scooter. So you can't take like masses of shopping. And also I don't drive it, my husband drives it. So for me, the only thing is food shopping. I have a trolley, or I just like essentially carry my shopping. So I used to love in London, like going and doing a massive like 1-hour food shop. It just was something that I really used to love to do. Don't love food shopping here. I find it more of like a chore, just because until we had a little open near us, I didn't really like the shopping as much. You're Portuguese, I'm so sorry. I don't know. There's something about the way that the tills are also organized. Like, if you have massive shopping, they have only like a small till, so like the queues are crazy. I don't know, I find it really sensory overload, whereas Lidl is a little bit more chill. They have like self-checkouts. It's kind of long, but so I would say the food shopping, and then also like clothes shopping. Like, I do not do barely any online shopping here in Portugal. It either honestly just gets lost, takes forever, or I don't know, I don't really do it. I do it very seldomly. Like, sometimes I'll order on Massimo Dutti, go pick it up in store. I literally have a Zara, which is decent, and Massimo Dutti, 10-minute walk, maybe even less, 7-minute walk from me. But like, I thought Portugal would have a lot more like boutique-y shops, or Lisbon at least, and I haven't really found that. Although saying that, like, I went vintage shopping. This is my Nelly jacket with my friend Nelly. I don't think she watches this, but this is my Nelly jacket, and I got this like suede jacket for 40 euros, but I got this in an area called Salbento, which is a little bit like not that much further, but I don't really go there much. So the only thing is honestly the food shopping and the like online shopping that I don't love, but everything else compared to London, like the food scene is amazing. It's so cheap. Normally my husband and I walk everywhere at the moment. Like, if we go to a restaurant, we try and walk. We walk back, which is something we would never ever do. I actually lived in a very leafy part of, like, it's technically Greater London. I lived in Hertfordshire, and we had a lovely town centre, like row of shops. What's that called? And they're all screaming at me. I don't know, like, we would, like, honestly, I think maybe we've walked there. Like, I lived there for 5 years, 6 years. Maybe we walked there once. It just wasn't something, like, we would always get in our car. That could also be due to the fact that obviously we lived in Greater London. We lived a little bit further out. I think if you live more centrally, you're more inclined to get the tube or walk or whatever. But the lifestyle change that we've had here, I just cannot compare it to London. We are outside, or we go outside so much more. We also eat out a lot more because it's cheaper. I mean, we used to eat out a lot in London, but I feel like we eat out a lot more here. Like yesterday, so funny. We were meant to go to a restaurant near us, and it's really busy. It's called Galeto, by the way, if anyone's been. It's like literally like a Portuguese institution for food. It's been around for so long, but it's a great kind of bistro. And stupidly, it was a Saturday. It was super busy, so we weren't going to wait that long, and instead we went to a shopping centre. They love a food court here, which I love as well, and we got Thai food, super cheap as well, like super cheap. Portions this massive. I think it came to like 20 euros for the both of us, and then just walked home. Would never do that in the UK. Again, it could be just because we were not in that lifestyle, but we just have really adapted to being here, is what I'm trying to say. My answers are very long, but I want to kind of convey why we like it here so much. Was it easy to make new friends? I wouldn't say it was easy, but you definitely have to get yourself like out there. I think a lot of you guys know my circle in London was minuscule, like still is, but that is also very much, it was my own fault that I never really prioritized making friends in my 20s. When we came here, it was something that I put on my mind that I wanted to prioritize, and that's where I say it needs to be something that you do actively. So for me, joining Bumble BFF, for example, was definitely me putting myself out there, because you know, it's almost like you're dating, you know, you're meeting people and they might not like you. I had a couple, I think like 2 or 3 girls that I met that, like, you know, either I didn't really kind of get on with them or they didn't really vibe with me, which is totally fine. So there is that kind of awkward stage, and also just the stage of getting to know people. But what's become lovely now is I've made a really lovely, like honestly, loveliest group of girlfriends, but we've all kind of brought people in as well. And it's almost like, because your friend has vetted someone and they kind of know the person, you almost, it's a little bit more fail-safe. Whereas obviously if I was to go on Bumble BFF again, I'd have to do the whole process of, you know, are you going to gel with this person? So although I would say, you know, I've got like closer to certain girls in the group, there's still definitely that like lovely core group of friends. I actually had a Halloween party, which I freaking love Halloween. We had a Halloween party here on Friday, and I feel like it's also easier for people to get together here. I don't know, maybe again it was because we know we lived a little bit further for people, we didn't have people around as much, whereas here it's just, I feel like my friends have been over here like so many times already, and it's just easier to kind of flit back and forth between everybody's houses. So I would say it's not easy to make friends. Like for example, and this is something definitely that I need to work on, I would find it harder to integrate with a Portuguese group of friends, just because right now I don't speak the language, and that is definitely something that is ignorant on my part. I don't hold this against, you know, Portuguese people, but I would want to kind of work on that way more before I go and try and start integrating myself. I will definitely work more on making Portuguese friends once my language skills improve, but for now it's much easier to integrate into an expat community when you're an expat yourself. But I don't want to pigeonhole myself. Why did you decide on Portugal? Again, that goes back to my husband. We had toyed, I think the only other place that we would have maybe thought about was Amsterdam, but we were very, very much drawn to the fact that the weather here is just incredible. And, you know, 2 people coming from London, and we both have lived in London for a while, although we've lived in other areas like of Europe in our, you know, younger years. For us, especially living here now, the weather does, and you know, I attest to this, the weather makes such a difference to your mood. You know, I would have days that I would call like my rot days in London way more frequently than I do here. Not to say that I don't, you know, there are days when you're like, can't be bothered, don't want to see anyone, want to just, you know, sit on the sofa. But we do get out here so much more, and it is honestly just because of that. So places like Amsterdam was kind of a little bit more off the cards because of that reason. You could also argue, Barbara, why were you not looking at places like Italy? You speak the language. Listen, Italy is amazing. You know, who wouldn't love to one day live in Italy again? Like I would love that as an Italian, especially coming from the wedding. And you know, we stayed at the venue that we got married at for 5 days, and I got so close to all the people there, and like, you know, it felt so warm. But it would just be so much harder for my husband, because Italy, there isn't as much of an English speaking expat community as there is in Portugal. You know, I am Italian, and it's just, it is what it is. I mean, I don't know if it's changed more recently. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, and Lisbon, the way or Portugal, it's like it stood still in time at the perfect time for it to still feel like it has that punchiness, but you are keeping all those really quaint little bits about it. And that's the only way I can describe it. Like, it still hasn't been infiltrated with that lost sense of what it truly is. I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's a very different feeling than what I've had in any other country or city. and that's what we ultimately have loved about it, and that's what I think my husband fell in love with. Someone said about cost of living compared to the UK. The cost of living here, rent is still relatively expensive, especially in the centre is super expensive, but, and I will caveat and say but, for the place that we have found here in Lisbon, we may have also been lucky with the time period that we moved here, because we moved here in the winter. I have heard from my friends who move that it's much easier to find a place in the colder months than it is in the summer months, because obviously people do more short-term letting in the summer months rather than in the winter. So if you were looking to move, a big tip of mine would be maybe look in the colder months. We've actually just had a few of our friends, I think like 3 of my friends have been moving recently since they came here. So they kind of did their time in their relative places and then they've moved on. So that would be one big tip. And also, you know, just if you can look a little bit further out and get more for your money. So, you know, we could have spent way more and been a little bit more central, but we like this area because, you know, there isn't that many tourists here. It's way more Portuguese, and it just kind of, you know, made sense for us. But you can definitely, if you are someone who's not so big on like outside space, or like the floor that you live in, for example, you know, you're going to get a much better deal if you live on the 4th floor with no elevator, with no lift, or you know, essentially you can still find, I feel like, a good deal, but you might just have to live further out. In terms of cost of living of like food, we honestly, like yesterday we went out for dinner for like 22 euros. On average, I would say, we're not drinkers, we very, very rarely drink, but I would say a meal out averages us like 40-50 euros between us, which is like 25 euros each. It's you know, when we get a bill for like when I get a bill for like 65 euros between 2 of us, I'm like, oh, this was a little bit more spendy, because it is a lot cheaper here, unless you go to the more sort of touristy restaurants. But if you go to like a taverna here in Portugal, I think I said that right, you can eat on like 8 euros, 7 euros, maybe even 5, and it's not, you know, it's not totally unheard of to be able to eat on super cheap and still have really, really good food. I said, you know, you were going more between London and Portugal. Did you decide to stay? I have decided to make the move here a little bit more permanent in terms of like my side. I thought I would be back and forth from like the UK way more than I was, just because I thought, you know, I might be homesick for the business as well. I thought I'd be going back more, but the reason I didn't come back more in these 10 months was testament to the fact that I loved it here so much. So that's why I would say that the move is way more permanent than I thought it would be. Could you live there easily without knowing the language? Yes, yes, yes. If you really, really wanted to, you do not have to learn Portuguese living here, which, listen, you know, you do you. There is a huge benefit to being able to go out and not having to struggle a lot of the time with speaking Portuguese, but obviously there's also a hindrance to that because you get very, very comfortable. So you normally find that on average people kind of 55, 60 and up speak less English. But then again, if you're in a touristy area, you know, let's say you're in Baía Chiado, or you know, in the center of town, Avenidas Novas, doing if you're in Avenida de Liberdade, sorry, and you're doing shopping, or in like the shopping centers, most people speak English. But yeah, if you're gonna go to like the smaller, you know, hole in the wall kind of places, they won't. But Google Translate is my best friend. Rarely have I had so much trouble where I've been like, oh my god, which again kind of is a catch-22, because it almost, if it was harder, it would spur you on to learn a little bit quicker. But obviously, let's say like people call you on the phone sometimes, if they don't speak Portuguese, if they don't speak English, it can be really difficult. But other than that, you can 100% live here without knowing the language. Whereas I've had places like Spain, France, Germany. My sister lived in Germany. She said it was so much harder to integrate. Here it's just way easier. I go to a gym here, and the trainers speak phenomenal English. Like, it's completely different. People asked, will you be working as a pharmacist in Portugal? being completely honest, it's not an avenue that I'm kind of looking into to work as a pharmacist, you know, for the Portuguese people. It's much easier for me to work for a company that is, you know, UK based, and I can work for the company from here. The reason being is, yes, I would definitely have to do some kind of conversion. I haven't looked into it in great deals because, listen guys, I can't even speak the language now, and I'm gonna have to go and learn all the legalities and the drug names and the way they do things here in Portugal. It's going to be difficult. Also, being completely candid, the pay difference here is large. So my wage would be, you know, I would take a big hit essentially working as a pharmacist here compared to living in the UK and working there. So the easy answer for me is no. Is it doable? Of course. You just have to convert, I believe. You know, you'd have to speak to the GPHC essentially, but it's not a no. It's just not something that I'm really looking into. I feel like I belong here for the moment, very much so. There's definitely a sense of this was weirdly meant to happen in the just weirdest sense, and I don't regret it for 1 second. For example, I just got a text message in Portuguese. I don't speak Portuguese. I understood it because it's very similar to Italian, but anyway, that is my super lengthy video about living in Portugal. I hope I've kind of given enough context and also just an idea of what it's like here, but I'd be more than happy to, you know, answer questions. And, you know, let's say I get a flood of people asking me about moving here, it would definitely be something that I'd be interested to focus a bit more on or discuss more. I've always tried on my, you know, on here to not niche myself too much into talking about or discussing like one thing. I've always really enjoyed talking about so many different aspects to my life, and I think if you've been watching me for a long time, you also have probably noticed that I've changed a lot, and that there is hopefully a little bit more open-mindedness to my personality and just way of doing things. So yeah, if you guys obviously were like, Barbara, do a lot more on like Portugal or you know, content or talking about moving, and let's say loads of you are interested, I would be so open to helping anybody that was like really serious about moving here. But otherwise, you know, I'm excited to bring you guys on this journey because like I said, we're going to be here for the foreseeable. And I'd love to do like a flat tour. I haven't done one. I always mean to do it, and then I don't know if it's because also subconsciously it's that privacy element of life that I've enjoyed, which kind of keeps me off the internet a bit more nowadays. But yeah, I'm just really appreciative that after all these years you guys are still watching, and if you have made it this far, you can leave me another comment just saying hopefully that you enjoyed the video. But I love you guys all so much, and I will see you all very soon. Take care. Bye.